Hi guys, welcome to the barrel video of the first assignment. So in this one we'll be creating a barrel. Straight away what we're going to be doing is making our project because that's what we need to do at the beginning of everything. So I've got my barrel that's going to be deposited on my desktop. So, oh, so barrel going on my desktop. Cool. So straight away what I want to be doing is thinking about the basic shape of the barrel. What basic primitive is a barrel? It's a cylinder. So I'm going to go grab a cylinder and then I'm going to make a cylinder that fills the grid like that. Cool. So first thing I'm going to do is change the translate X and translate Z to 0. So I can make sure that it's actually sat nice against the grid. And then I'm going to come down to the input section here on our channel box and just drop down. And where we've got subdivision axis, this is how many faces are going around, how many divisions are going around my actual cylinder. Now 20 is an alright number. We can go higher, we can go lower. I'm actually going to go lower. I'm going to go down to either 16 or 12. So if we have a look at the top and bring this down to 16, it's not really that much of a difference. So I'm going to bring it all the way down to 12. There you go. What I am actually looking for when I'm doing this is that I've got a horizontal and a vertical line. This little nice little cross section here. So if I need to, for whatever reason, cut half of it or work in a quarter or anything like that, it's easy for me to then duplicate and move around to form it again. Cool. So when I've got my subdivision axis and I've got my position sorted, I'm going to do a save because I don't want to lose any of the work I've done. So let's go to barrel 0, 1. Again, working in increments. So first thing I'm going to do is get the height of my barrel sorted. So I'm going to, in my mind's eye, I'm going to squint my eyes and look at a barrel. And again, we're going for that Cupid barrel. So I'm going to just get, and this is going to be pretty cartoony. So I'm going to, it's about that high, I reckon. If you want, you can also go to something like the side or the front view and actually use the grid and snap against the grid to get much more of a precise size if you want to. If you know you want it to be like 20 units high or anything like that. Cool. So when I've done that, I'm okay with that height. It's now time for me to decide the width, the very widest part, how wide that's going to be. So what I'm going to do is go to my edge mode. I'm going to select the center group of edges there. I'm going to cut across them. So I'm going to go up to my edit mesh and then connect like that. Oh, actually using the wrong connect there, sorry. I'm going to go to mesh tools and connect. There we go. So remember this tool, I can either add or take away edges. I just want one edge at the minute. And then I'm going to just use my scaling tool just to scale it out. And I'm going to decide how wide I want my barrel. So about that. That seems quite cool for me. So when I've decided that's about as wide as I want my barrel, I'm going to add another 2 edges at the top and at the bottom here. So using the same thing, so selecting in edge mode. One thing I am doing as well is I'm not looking at my barrel from a weird angle like this, because if I try and select those edges, I'm going to be selecting stuff I don't want to select. So I'm looking at a bit of a side view like that, so that I can just draw a selection box over the middle, or at the top and at the bottom, and I'm only selecting those vertical lines. Okay, so when I've done that, mesh tools again, connect again, and then I've got my 2 connections here, like this. That done. I've got my 2 points there that I'm going to scale out, but again, like I've gone over in class, I'm not going to scale out from the center, because if I do that, it's also going to take the y-axis into the movement and it's going to up like that. I don't want that. I only want it to move out in the z and the x. So the 2 ways I can do that is either holding control and grabbing the y-axis, which allows me to basically ignore the y-axis. I'm telling Maya to ignore that axis. Or I can grab this little square here, which does the same thing. The color is the axis it's going to ignore. So in this case, I can ignore the z-axis, I can ignore the x-axis, or I can ignore the y-axis. So I'm going to grab that. I'm going to move it just a bit so I've got a nice kind of curve to my barrel like that. Nice, cool, just like that. So now I'm going to do a save because I've got quite a bit of work done there. So I'm just going to do a save. It's going to be my 0.2. Yep. Now, what I'm going to be thinking about doing now is starting adding divisions, which I can use to extrude my braces from, or the things that are going to hold my barrel together. So because I'm not going to be making those separate bits of geometry. Everything's going to be, or as much as I can, is going to be made out of the same piece of geometry. It just makes everything a lot cleaner and a lot. If we were ever trying to like connect stuff or make stuff look uniform, it's a lot easier to do like that. So I'm going to select this upper top ring here of edges and the very bottom one, just like I've done before, like that. And I'm going to again use my mesh connect like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to add two divisions like this. So when I've got this green line up here, I'm just going to middle mouse drag in the scene until the connect segment says 2, and I've got these 2 segments per unit here. Okay, just like that. So now I've got a nice little ring that I can use to extrude from. But I need one in the middle as well. I want that characteristic 3 braced Coopered barrel. So I'm going to do the same thing in the middle. Well, actually, no, I'm not going to do the same thing in the middle. For the middle bit, I'm going to select the middle and I'm going to hit the bevel tool, which is this up here. If I click that, you're going to see that it actually splits. It takes that single line and then splits it in half, or splits it into 2 and separates them. Now, this is a little bit too wide for what I want, but with this box it brings up, I get to adjust some parameters inside that, which is quite cool. So what I'm going to do is use my fraction, because fraction is basically how wide this is. So I can just use that. 0.2 looks about right. Maybe I want that a tiny bit wider, but this is jumping up to 0.3, which is too wide. So what I'm going to do is 0.25. No, 0.22. Yeah, 0.22 looks about right. So even though you might not be able to get just by using the scrub line, or if I hover over, you can see like the arrow becomes 2 little facing arrows. If I can't get the right thing from there, I can just manually put in what I want. There we go. And there I've got the information that I want. Cool. Now it's time for us to actually save again before we do the next thing, just to make a point about saving. So 0.03, not 0.34. There we go. So now it's time for me to actually extrude these bits out the side. So I'm just going to go around in my face mode, and in these thin bits I've made before, what I'm going to do is select a face and double click next to it. Select a face, double click, select a face, double click, like that. And then that allows me to select all the way around that section. With that done, I'm going to click my extrude tool. Now we've already used this to extrude in for the crate, but for this time we're going to use it just a slightly bit different. So I'm going to click my extrude, just one to remember, until I get this. And with thickness, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move thickness out a little bit. You can see there that they're all going out like that. So I just want to get a little bit of thickness going on, just to give myself a little bit of visual interest, like that. So now we can see that our barrel has got our general shape in there. It looks a bit barrel shaped. We've got these nice little bracings going around. And it's almost done. All we need to do now is, it's almost done to a basic level. All we need to do now is give ourselves a top and a bottom. I'm actually going to get rid of the grid for this bit. So this next bit is, again, really simple. We're going to be using the extrude tool, very similar to what we did before with the crate. I'm going to go to face mode again. But instead of just having to go around and manually click these ones, because these triangles don't have that really cool function that we can do with quads, like that. So I'm going to go around and I'm going to select individually. Or I can come over to the left and select this little paintbrush and this little blue circle. And that's my paint select. So at the minute it's this very, very, very small red circle. But if I hold B and then left click drag right or left, it actually changes the size. And I just want to get a little bit bigger, like this. Okay. And then I can just actually paint in a circle around the radius and then paint at the bottom there. Like that, and then that allows me to grab both of them. Now be careful, because if this is too big like this, it's going to grab more than what I really want. And you've always got to be careful about your selections. If, for instance, if I was doing this manually and I was going around shift clicking, by this point I might be getting really bored and then I speed up. And then what's going to happen is I will start selecting, oh well, I haven't done, it seems, but what might happen is I might accidentally select things that I didn't mean to. So whenever you're doing lots of selections, you've always got to be careful. And you might accidentally extrude as well like that, because I'm holding shift, and if you hold shift and click one of these directional arrows on the move tool, it actually extrudes it. So try not to do that. Oop, it's too big. So just like that, make sure I don't get anything else that I don't want selected. That's true. And then do this, and then boom. Cool. So now we're going to use the extrusion tool again. So I'm going to click extrude. And I'm just going to use the normal scaling tool. And I'm just going to use, just like I did before, where I wanted to only use the Z and the X scaling. I'm going to do that and just bring it in a tiny bit. And then in a tiny bit. Now, why I'm doing this is I want to scale this in because I kind of want to match the way this plank has been cut and then it's been bowed. So there's like a bit of a, you can see there's kind of a bit of a direction this is flowing. I want to have these be a little bit sympathetic to that. So just bring it in a little bit. And because I'm doing this in the top and the bottom at the same time, I don't have to go into the bottom and do the same thing. So I'm 2 birds, 1 stone. And then what I'm going to do is hit extrude again, go back to my scale tool again, and without holding anything, I'm just going to scale in the y-axis just to bring that in a little bit, and then scale in without using the y-axis. Now that way, you can see what I'm doing is I'm matching the thickness. I'm going to try and eyeball the thickness of the wood, but then I'm matching the way the wood's been bending around, so I'm getting this very kind of believable interior cover to the barrel. Or you can paint that to look, make it look like fluids or something. Okay, so it's a very basic setup. That's basically the barrel done. There's a few things I need to sort out. I can see here that there's some faceted edges and things aren't smooth enough, so I can go around and basically just smooth everything so it looks horrible like that. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to select the edges I want to make nice and crisp and harden the edge on it. Just go around shift double clicking the edges to select them. Oops, like that, and then harden edge. Now what that has done is it's turned those very smooth angles into very sharp angles. So now we're getting quite a lot of visual interest. There's a lot of things that are going on. And if we turn on the screen space ambient occlusion, get a better idea. So you can see that that's looking really nice. And imagine that in a scene on some sort of like piratey dockyard thing. That'd look really nice. So I'm going to leave that physical model like that for the time being. Again, in class we'll be going over things we can do to make this a little bit more interesting, but I'm going to leave the modeling as that for now. I'm going to do a save because I've not done that in a while. So let's do a save. So what I'm going to be doing now is actually UV in this. And the UVing of the barrel is a little bit different to how we UV'd the crate. This is both easier and harder at the same time. Some of the things are going to be well easier. Some of the things are going to be not a lot harder, but just a little bit different. So this is not a cube, and it's a very round object. There's very few flat surfaces on it. So I'm not going to be using the planar that much, but it is a cylinder, and there is a setting or a projection called a cylindrical projection, which basically, if I just click it, you can see it here, it makes like a half a cylindrical shape here, which again is our virtual camera. So it's basically taking like a virtual 360-degree photograph of our object, and it's laying it out the best way it knows inside our UV editor. If I bring up a UV editor, there we go. So that's what me just selecting the entire mesh and clicking projection, that's what it gives me, which isn't super great. Again, remembering what we went over about what the red means and what the purple means and stuff, I could do better. I could do a lot better. So what I'm going to do is actually do this in parts. And I know that this is going to be made up of multiple materials, real world materials like wood and iron and stuff. So I'm going to go around and select all the wooden sections that aren't flat. So I'm going to ignore the top and the bottom. And I'm also going to ignore this bit here. Actually, no, I'm going to project this ring here along with everything else. So I'm not going to select this top and bottom bit, and I'm not going to select these little braces I've made. So I'm going to go around and just click, shift, double click to select the ring, to select that loop, and just go around and select just these bits. Like that. And then I'm going to hit my cylindrical unwrap. And then that's what it gives us. Which looks a little bit more, it makes more sense looking at it. And if we turn on our checkerboard, we can see that it's looking a little bit better now. It's still not perfect. I can see there's some skewed bits and some bits that are a little bit more square, some bits are a little bit more rectangular. This bit up here is definitely not working as well as this bit down here. But this is where it gets a little bit more difficult because we're going to have to actually expose and align and sort out a few of these different areas. But as a basic sense, that's pretty good so far. So then I'm going to do the same thing on the braces. So I'm going to go around and turn that off so you can see what we're doing. There we go. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to select the outer face. I'm not going to try and select these thin bits. I'm just going to select the outer faces first. And then hit Shift period, just like we did with our crate, select just to grow the selection. So I'm grabbing the top and the bottom bits. And then I'm going to do the cylindrical unwrap again, like that. And then I'm just going to move that to the side for now. So if you look at that, again, looking a little bit nicer. Not perfect, because you can see these are more squashed. Now these two bits, the top and the bottom, they're really easy to do. All I have to do is plane out project those in the y-axis, like that, and they're done. Now the blue one is the top, and the red one is the bottom, but we can flip those, remember? But we'll do that last. The first thing I do whenever I UV is generally lay stuff out in groups. So I've got a group for my my metal section, I've got a group for my the wooden body, and I've got a group for my top and the bottom. So for the more complex objects, or when I'm doing characters, I'll have many groups laid out, and they'll all be relatively messy, but I'm just separating stuff into manageable chunks at first. So first what I'm going to do is deal with the wooden section, this bit. Now as you can see, we've got a few red bits here. Actually, what I can do is grab this and click our isolate button, which is this little blue dotted square with an arrow. There you go. So now I'm only seeing the wooden section, but you can see that I've got some red sections and some blue sections, and in here I've got some purple, and which means I've got red and blue mixing with each other. So I'll just move these two bits closer together because they're working. So I can just kind of move those out the way. And these two bits, so I know this is my top bit, this is my bottom bit. What I've got to do is basically separate stuff out. So what I'm going to do in face mode, I'm just going to grab all these, and then in my UV editor, I'm just going to move them down. And I'm going to keep my, I'm going to keep going back and forth from my checkerboard and blue. Because when I'm moving them, I don't want to overly distort them. Okay. And I'm going to grab my UVs. Actually, yeah, I got my UVs here. And again, this is where it gets a little bit weird. I'm going to grab all the UVs on the bottom of the inside here, which is actually this line here, this middle line. Oh, we're going to be careful because I'm actually selecting stuff I don't want to select. That's because they're really close to each other. So I'm going to do some adjustments. There we go. There we go. So now I've just got this like little ring on the inside, and I'm just going to move those up like that. So now the blue. But if we go to our checkerboard, it's a little bit messy. So I've just got to go through and just using the transform just to move it up and down. I'm just going to eyeball in these squares. Again, this could probably be done a lot more efficiently and a lot more technically, but I'm trying to get you guys to use the tools, and I'm trying to get you guys to really understand the basic mechanics of how to use this stuff. So I'm just use translate tool. Again, I'm eyeballing in a square. Alright. Okay, so that looks alright. Boom, there we go. And then we've got the bottom one, so we have to do the exact same thing. So what I'm going to do is first go in and see. Cool. So this white line here on the inside, this white line on the inside here is actually this line of UVs going around the inside. So I'm going to grab that, make it a little bit bigger so I can get more space. There we go. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to move it out. And then I'm going to do the same thing I did before. So I'm going to separate stuff off from each other. There we go. So I'm exposing these edges. I'm laying stuff out, so I've got no more reds. And I'm keeping them all connected. I'm not cutting any bits off. I am keeping each separate section disconnected, obviously, because the wood's being obscured by these metal slats. So I don't want weird continuations in the wood. But this section up the top and up the bottom, I'm going to keep them together because it's one piece of wood and it's going to make our texturing a little bit easier and a little bit nicer. So turn on my checkerboard and I'm going to do the same thing as I've done before. I'm just going to eyeball in. I'm going to eyeball in the UVs. So okay, looks about right. Again, you spend more time, you take more care, you'll get a better result. But what I've done there is I've finished off my wooden section. So that's all my wooden section done. They're all pretty, well, actually, you know what, I've not finished them off. I forgot to actually go in and fix these two middle bits because they are looking a little bit squashed. So if I grab these two in the middle, these two in the middle here, just again, I'm just doing it in UV mode, just to grab the actual UVs. And I'm going to scale it and just again see how when I scale up and down how it's working with these squares. And I'm just going to eyeball those squares in. There we go, looks about right. Now if this was meant to be a super hyper realistic AAA PBR, we would spend a lot more time on these UVs, and the UVs might be a little bit more difficult to actually lay out, and we might have relatively ugly UVs considering, but because this is a stylistic, you cannot skimp and cheap out on the UVs, even if it is stylistic, but it's the wobbliness of the UVs. You can see there's a little bit of distortion in some areas. That's more forgiven in this sort of area. Cool. So that's my wooden section right there. That's all good to go. So when I come to lay everything in, that's good. That's my metal section. And now this is pretty much the same deal. We've got sections that are nice and thin, but when we project it, they just come across as either very, very thin bits or not at all. We can't see them at all, but we need to expose them. Just like with a crate, we need to expose every face so that it can be textured. Now, this is going to be very easy for the middle one, because if we just select all the middle faces and inside the UV editor scale it inwards, what we're going to do is, you can see here when I scale it inwards, I'm actually exposing these edges here. And if I just keep an eye on this checkerboard, like that, then that'll give me a pretty nice looking front. But I can see on the top there that this is very, very squashed. So what I'll do is I'll grab, at the same time, I'll grab the top of the UVs there. I'll grab the bottom of the UVs there, like that. I'll just go in and use my scale tool again just to see if I can get these looking a little bit nicer. And again, I've got to eyeball this. I've got to get a good idea about it. So that is looking okay to me. Okay, cool. So then I've got to do the exact same thing for the top and the bottom. And there's a few different ways I can do this, because if I'm looking at it here, these are already technically exposed. These are already blue. These very thin. Oh, wrong bits. These very thin bits down here, they're already exposed. So I don't need to expose them. And the same thing's going on down here. It's these purple bits here I need to expose. So what I'm going to do is use that UV in trick I just used up here when I was selecting the UVs up here and down here and basically scaling them uniformly like that. I'm going to carefully grab this thicker white line, because this thicker white line is the UVs here on the bottom underside. So I'm going to grab that white line on the bottom and I'm going to grab that white line on the top. So I'm going to go through. I just got to be careful that I don't accidentally grab any other UVs I don't want. Like that. Cool. And up the top, do the same thing. So carefully grabbing those, make sure I don't accidentally grab anything I don't want. There we go. And scale out. That's looking okay. I'm not accidentally grabbing anything I don't want to. Nope, cool. So checkerboard on. Okay, it's looking okay. Again, we're going to adjust this. What we can actually do, just to be a little bit cheeky, is we can select this. As long as we're aware of which one we're selecting, I'm going to rotate this bottom one, and I'm basically going to make the top and the bottom identical, then move the lower one back into place. I can do that by selecting this bottom object, turn that off again, selecting this bottom object, going to transform, which is in my UV toolkit, and then down to here it says tools, rotate, it says rotating around 45 degrees. I click this a couple of times and then it's basically done a full 180. I can bring it up here. And then what I can do is, using techniques we've done already, I can align these together. Or in fact, what I can do is I can lay them over the top of each other. That might be a bit easier. So I'm going to lay these over top of each other like that. And they should be pretty much, yep. So I've got two laid over top of each other. But because I was doing everything very uniformly, you can't actually see. I can manipulate these perfectly. This is getting a little bit complex, so don't worry about doing this specific thing. This is a trick or workaround or whatever you want to call it, a bad habit of mine. But just as long as when you're looking at your checkerboard, these are as square as you can and nothing's really distorted, you're golden. But I'm just going to take a bit of time to make sure my UVs are looking as nice as I can get them in the time I'm giving myself. Okay, so I've just extended those a tiny bit. Those are looking a little bit rectangular still, so I'm going to bigger like that. They're square. They're square. Cool. So I'll grab that. So what the ones I've just grabbed there. So I've just literally gone to UV mode and double clicked, and I can see I've got the top ones there. So I'll move them up. Grab these ones, which are obviously my bottom ones. Rotate them around and then move them down. So now I've got 3 sets, and these are all my metal sections. So now they're done. So now they're ready to go. And then I've just got these two here. So one is red, one is blue. Red doesn't mean, remember, red doesn't mean that I've broken the UV. It just means it's facing the opposite direction. Sometimes you will have red and blue UVs in the same UV set. The only times it's ever is wrong is if you've got text which needs to be read a certain way. So if you want, you're making an ambulance and you want the backwards ambulance, but you write ambulance on a blue surface the right way around, then it's going to look wrong, because if you observe an ambulance on the front is backwards, so that you can see it, you can read it the right way around in the wing mirror. But in this case, I'm going to flip this to be blue. The way I do that is go to modify, selecting it first, modify, and then down to flip, which is the 4th one down. There you go, it's blue. And now I've just got to be aware of which one I'm dealing with. So now if I look at my checkerboard, obviously that's looking fine and that's looking fine. But one thing that is going on, I will say, is there's a big difference between sizes of here and sizes of here. The wooden actual body and the bracings are pretty much the same size. I'm not going to try really resizing those too much. But these two are a little bit too big. But I'm not going to change their size just yet, because what I'm going to do is actually start laying these out on a texture sheet and I'm actually going to lay these out so that the edges line up perfectly with the walls. So if we do have to have a repeating pattern, we don't have to worry about, you know, the texture ending on this side and then just exposing the background color of the texture sheet. So a way we can do that is very, very simple. I'm going to grab everything in face mode. I'm going to come down to align and snap. I'm going to make this lie predominantly over the 1:1 UV area here. I'm going to click normalize, and that will then snap it and make it fit perfectly inside this square. So you can see these are perfectly lined up with the walls like that. So I'll move them. So I'm not going to move them side to side, but for now I'm just going to move them up so I can make rooms, because I'm going to bring these in and do the same thing. So bring these down, hit normalize, boom. And I've got U and V both selected because the normalize, I want it to normalize in 2 axes, not just one. So I don't want them to just become very thin but still be kind of at the same height. I want them to basically scale down and fit the area like that. So I can move them down there, and then I can move them there. It doesn't really matter at what point you put the wood and what point you put the metal, as long as you have a definite, this is my metal section and this is my wooden section. So, and I can do a little bit of economic placing now. So any of the gaps between the UVs, I'm thinking I could probably use more of that space. I'm going to do that, and I'm actually going to bring the whole thing down pretty much to the bottom of the UV space like that. And remember, economic UV spacing, we want to utilize as much of this gray space as possible. If possible, I don't want to have any UV space not being used. So with these two dudes, what I'm going to do is just grab them and scale them down and make them fit inside this area as best they can. Like that. And if I look at my checkerboard, everything's looking pretty good. The scaling isn't that bad between pieces. I'm not particularly bothered. We're not going to go into so much detail where it's going to be like a definite, well, the scaling differences or the size differences aren't to the point where it's obviously one is super high detailed and one is super low detailed. Everything is going to look pretty much the same. Only the most discerning of eyes will be able to tell the difference. And what that has done is actually got us our final barrel UV'd, ready to go. You can see here that this has given us our nice clean line. So this white line is actually where the seam ends. So the texture will repeat over this area. So if you want to make sure not to have any texture repeats, you've got to be very aware of what's going on here, or basically what's going on these areas of the texture sheet, so that you don't have a really crazy transition in color, like it goes from a very dark and all of a sudden gets very bright. Areas like this, where the texture has a seam, needs to be as neutral or as tileable as possible. Again, that's something we're going to be doing. But for something like this, it's very easy to not have that happen because of things I'm going to show you how to texture and stuff. So that's pretty much it. That is ready to go into Photoshop. That's ready to go into a game engine. All I'm going to do now is just save out these UVs into our source images folder. So again, I'm going to grab them. I'm going to select everything. I'm going to go to our UV snapshot. There you go. And it's going to the wrong place again, because that's an issue with my Maya. Okay, so I'm going to source images and I'm just going to call it barrel UV. There you go. I'm going to keep it as 2048. I'm going to keep it as a Maya if, and I'm going to keep it as a red line. I'm going to hit apply and close. And so in Photoshop, all I have to do is do the same thing I've done before. I'm going to go to File, Open, go to my desktop, and then find my barrel, and then find my source images, and then find my barrel UV. And then I'll bring that up. So of course, then I'll get a layer underneath, name this layer UV, and lock it. So I can't do anything on this UV layer. And I'm going to drop a gray in there. So now I've got my red, my barrel UV that I can then start putting layers in and then start painting. I'm good to go. Cool. So from here, we can then start working on our basic textures, our different layers, our details, our painting shadows, or we can take it into Maya and start rendering it, or we can take it into Unreal and start using it as a basic physics object or something like that. So from there, we have done 2 objects which are absolutely usable inside the game engine that if you just take a little bit of time. Again, in class, I would have shown you how to just, adjust some areas so it looks a little bit less uniform, like upsetting some of these UVs or upsetting some of these edges. It will mean the UVs will be a little bit more difficult, but it will look really good. So that is the barrel. I'm just going to do one last save so I know what I've done or where I'm up to. Cool. So that is now the barrel done and ready to go.